We might as well take it all in now. Blast is the new hot thing in town, and it's dominating a lot of the builds. But that's not all we have to offer here today, so let's blow this out the water. What's good, folks? It's KnightmareFrame here with a new WARFRAME video. Now, for those watching this video, this is part 2 of the Blast meta loadouts. However, it's not only going to be Blast builds. I released a gun video utilizing Blast damage synergies and explained the Blast damage changes. So if you want a detailed explanation on what has changed, do go check that video out. Now, just like the last video, this is a synergy with melee and a WARFRAME, meaning these types of things function optimally when paired with the right combination. People don't understand that. Anything else would not have the same interaction or a very suboptimal interaction. So, jumping straight into it, I'm sure a lot of you know about the Arcane Melee Influence. It's a melee arcane that activates when you deal melee damage and proc the electric status effect. And when you proc it, you trigger a chain lightning reaction within 20 meters. Along with that trigger, those electrical procs spread your modded elements with them, and not the physical damage types. So you already know where we're going with this. We're going to taxi all of those blast procs with melee influence, creating eruptions through chain lightning. The combo is really stupid. All you need to do is swing your melee and watch things go boom. The other arcane is melee Afflictions, where you add on 6 status procs to the current existing one. So for example, if you bleed enemies, you add on 6 bleed procs with 1 melee attack. And this application is only applied if enemies are affected by a melee attack that lifts, knocks down, or ragdolls them. So you want to avoid hard CCs like lockdown, electric stuns, heat panic, and cold freezing, as these status effects override any other effects that would knock down enemies. Now, the main star of the show is Lavos. Now, when I say there are certain things only Lavos can do, I literally mean he is the only one who can do it. For one, when you add duration onto Lavos, not only do you increase the ability duration, but it also affects status duration, which will play a massive part in certain builds. That's not all. Valence Formation, his elemental passive augment. This augment allows you to coat your weapons with the 4 base elements and even combined versions of those elements, while also guaranteeing every hit to trigger the element and the elemental reaction. Unfortunately, there can only be one instance of this elemental boon. Now, let me explain so people understand how powerful this is. Let's say, for example, you have Toxin on your weapon, and you activate the electric damage bonus. Now, your weapon will deal a combined element of corrosive alongside electric. That's very powerful. And when I say guaranteed, that means you can have 0% status chance you're still able to trigger the element and the elemental reaction. Saren can do quite a bit of what Lavos does, but they won't have the same results. Saren would scale differently and provide you with other benefits. Now, for those wondering on how to activate the augment, all you have to do is hold down one of the 4 abilities with the corresponding element and then cast any of his base abilities, meaning not a Helminth, and when you do so, you will apply the elemental damage buff. Unfortunately, this elemental buff does not scale with strength. It is hard locked to 200% damage bonus. Now, there are a few melee weapons that I'm going to show you. Weapons that you probably never heard of, forgot about, or just recently deleted because your friend told you that they're trash. Oh boy. The Keratinos Infested Claws. That's exactly how you pronounce it, trust me, I know. With innate viral and a unique passive that increases the range by 2.8 meters when you perform a heavy attack as you hit 12 times combo. And it has the second highest damage and status chance among all of the claws, right under Garuda's talons. The dual Ichor's Incarnon. This is one of the most broken ones. I made 2 entire videos with this weapon alone. And trust me, those other loadouts still shred. When you activate the Incarnon mode, every kill will spawn Toxin Clouds. These Toxin Clouds will deal your modded elemental damage along with Toxin damage. Now, these clouds are not affected by Condition Overload, but raw base damage. So you want to prioritize Prime Pressure Point and Arcane Fury on your builds. The Lesion, a polearm with high status chance, high in slash, but also one of the best unique traits where when triggering a status effect with this weapon, grants the weapon itself 15% attack speed and 100% toxin damage. And lastly, Harmony, the new scythe that came with Jade. Its unique trait allows all your damage over time that would deal damage individually over time go all into one massive tick and deal a larger singular instance of damage. It has built-in expedite suffering, pretty much. The weapon also grants you a buff for 30 seconds. That's a status duration buff. Status duration as a whole boosts expedite suffering because the damage over time lasts longer, which in turn makes the damage it will deal over an extended period be stronger when it's condensed into one singular instance. But when you combine this weapon with the rest of Jade's arsenal, the effect of this passive gains a longer duration and a stronger buff. Just get a couple of kills and proc each passive with the other weapons. You will know when you have either buffs because each time you're granted this buff, you will hear a chime. And when you finish off with the final weapon buff, you will hear an angelic choir, signifying that you have the bigger buff, and receive a 60-second buff with a stronger effect. But what if I tell you, with Lavos, you don't need to do any of that extra stuff? So without further ado, let's take a look at how we've put all of these things together. Starting off with Lavos' Archon Shards. Yes, those are 5 Tau Forged ability duration Archon Shards. You can see on the bottom right corner, I have 357% duration. Not only that, my status duration is set at 357 as well. Now, this is pretty huge. Not only am I benefiting with status duration, but this prolongs the buff of my Helminth ability, which happens to be Roar. Roar is a massive boon to all of these builds, as it provides you a damage multiplier that is considered as a faction damage multiplier. This means we have a universal faction damage mod. No matter where we go, we have a faction mod for any faction we're fighting up against. And what this means is that we can free up an entire mod slot on our weapons so we don't have to change faction mods every time we go into a new mission. And what faction damage does as a whole is that it multiplies your damage and it affects damage over time status effects to be applied twice. Not only that, faction damage as a whole synergizes really well with the new Elementalist mods. These Elementalist mods are also a damage multiplier to status effects. Unfortunately, they do not double dip like faction damage mods, but they are multiplicative to faction damage mods. So now you're able to increase all of your status effects damage to the next level. Before we get into the melee builds, let's have a look at Lavos' build as a whole so you understand what we're actually going to be doing. Alright, here we are at the build section, so hopefully you've paid attention to everything that was said prior to this part. If you did not understand anything, please take a look at the timestamps, see what you've missed. Because if you end up asking a question that's related to a topic that's already been covered, well, you didn't pay attention. So taking a look at the Lavos build. This build right here will be constant for all of the melee builds. The only thing that will change are the arcanes. But one of the arcanes that will remain consistent for most of them is Arcane Reaper. The great thing about Arcane Reaper is that it synergizes with melees. When you get a melee kill, you get health regen and bonus armor. Very nice to have, as this is going to be a health tanking, shield tanking, armor tanking build. Nothing to do with refreshing your shields, because Lavos doesn't have that luxury. Now, looking at the strength increases, I have Growing Power, Power Drift, Precision Intensify, Augur Secrets, and Blind Rage. All of this here is to increase the damage bonus on Roar. It does say 98%, but it goes all the way up to 132%, thanks to other forms of gaining strength, which I will get to in a bit. Our duration at 357 thanks to these 3 mods right here, and including the Archon Shards. Valence Formation, the augment that gives us the elemental damage bonus. And finally, adaptation for the survivability. Now let me show you how we get those strength increases. I do have my Grimoire here, which is going to grant me strength and will synergize with combo maintenance. So pay attention. The tome will have Vom Invocation. This is to grant me 60% strength, essentially a Molt Augmented. This will last for 20 seconds as long as it tags a decent amount of enemies. You're going to easily be doing that with its alternate fire. Secondary Dexterity is going to be my combo duration arcane. The damage doesn't matter, it's just for the combo duration. Paired alongside any other primary. I just happen to have the Rauta here. As you can see, it also has primary dexterity. Now, the other bit that we're going to use to increase our strength is Madarai. Madarai has this beautiful node called Sling Strength. After performing 2 Void Slings, you get a 40% strength increase that you can snapshot into any of your abilities, and that happens to be Roar. And of course, we get Power Transfer, which grants us 50% casting speed when we transference back into our Warframe. We won't be Void Slinging every single time since we have really high duration. To demonstrate how this works, let's go to a group of enemies here. Gonna switch to my Grimoire, alternate fire. Notice how it's ticking and we have 60% strength. We also triggered Growing Power. And also we have Sling Strength. Caster Roar, 136% damage increase. Okay, for the melee builds, we're going to start off with the dual Ichor Incarnon. For the evolutions, you want that for the attack speed, additional range, and finally increase in status chance. This is not a crit build, so you don't really have to worry about this. You want to focus on the status chance. You will still have 25% crit, which is more than enough to trigger Arcane Fury, which is going to be our second arcane for this build. Arcane Fury is a base damage multiplier for melees. So on critical hit, you have 60% chance to get 180% base damage on your melee weapon, which increases the damage of the clouds. Now, remember the rotation. When we engage enemies, you want to use your alternate fire, Grimoire, do your Void Slings, and you get the Roar buff. And also when you trigger your Grimoire, you're also able to activate Arcane Fury, and you can just start melee. But don't forget your elemental damage increase. Boom. Now we have melee influence, and they're just dead. I don't even have my Incarnon built up, as you need 6 times combo to get that going. Okay, now that we have our Incarnon activated, let's have a look. There you go. And when you respawn enemies, those clouds are going to damage them. And they're already dead. Just like that. Beautiful. Unfortunately, the clouds do not re-trigger influence, but they trigger your modded elements. And another unfortunate thing, they also don't help you build up combo, but they're going to help you clear out massive groups of enemies and also help you spawn camp a group of enemies when they're around the corner. Now, the other thing that people don't realize is that the dual Ichors have innate toxin. With this toxin, it's going to be really hard to mod for blast, corrosive, and electric. So that's why Lavos, with his third ability, electric damage bonus, will combine with the toxin while also giving us electricity, because remember, it is a guaranteed proc, which triggers alongside every other hit. So taking a look at the dual Ichor's build, the stance is really up to you, whatever you find comfortable. Discipline's Merit, very nice to have for any Incarnon weapon, as you need 4 hits to trigger the Tennokai effect, and that Tennokai effect allows you to perform a heavy attack without consuming any combo. Now, I have base damage here with Prime Pressure Point, double attack speed mods, because I'll be running Arcane Fury, and that's additional base damage. You do not want Condition Overload because they do not affect the clouds. You have your Blast here and additional Toxin. This Toxin mod further increases the damage of the Toxin clouds, and Melee Elementalist to increase our overall damage with our status effects. As you can see, it affects Slash, Heat, Electricity, Toxin, Blast, and your Gas, and the Melee Influence Arcane. So there you have the first melee. Now let's take a look at Harmony. As you know, Harmony has that unique trait that condenses all of those status effects to give you that massive tick. Pretty much expedite suffering. When you kill with a heavy attack, you get that harmonic resonance, which is a 30% status duration that lasts for 30 seconds. But as you saw, I have status duration coming from Lavos, and I have additional status duration modded onto this weapon. All the melees are going to have melee elementalist because this is super important to have. And don't forget your melee affliction arcane. Enemies affected by status effects gain 6 additional stacks when they're knocked down or flung by melee attacks. Reaping Spiral is a good stance to have, as it can also lift up enemies with your light attacks. But we're just going to be heavy attack spamming, and heavy attacks are further increased with combo duration. Here we have initial combo of 30, but if you want to add on to that, you can always change the Lavos build Replace Growing Power with Ready Steel. Ready Steel grants you 24 initial combo, which is really nice because it brings it up to 3 times combo on your melee weapon. So that's up to you what you want. You want the additional strength or you want Ready Steel. Both are a huge damage increase. Now for the elemental damage bonus, remember, electricity does stop enemies from being knocked down, but you don't necessarily have to worry about that. We're going to be flinging enemies or lifting them, and those status effects override the electricity stun. So it's up to you whether you want to run bonus toxin or bonus electricity. Either way works fine, and you're going to get hundreds of millions to even billions of damage. So I'm just going to be heavy attacking right now. 2 billion damage right there. 2 billion damage again. You see? It's a lot of damage. That's a lot of freaking damage. And now into the third melee, we have Lesion. Lesion has a unique trait where it increases your attack speed and grants you toxin elemental damage. Here you can see the build. I only have Blast because we're already getting toxin from the passive, and when we use Valence Formation with electricity to combine with this toxin, we get corrosive blast and electricity. And here I am running condition overload because this is a status focused build. Again, I'm increasing the status chance even further with weeping wounds, and I have additional range with spring loaded blade. As you notice, all the builds don't have faction damage because I have roar, free universal faction damage. Now for the second arcane on Lavos, highly recommend to have arcane strike for more attack speed, or if you want some additional survivability, pair that up with Arcane Guardian or Arcane Blessing. Either one works fine, and to be honest, you won't even notice that you're taking that much damage because with one swing, you're wiping an entire room. So let me demonstrate this. And as soon as we proc a status effect with our melee, boom, we get the Frenzy buff right there. Do you see that? That's the Frenzy. That's a lot of damage, and we're not even full combo to take full advantage of Weeping Wounds, and we're still destroying these bad guys. And finally, we're going to look at the Karen. Let's take a look at the build. Starting off with the unique trait. Heavy attacks at 12 times combo grants you the bonus range. Now, how are you going to know that you have the bonus range? Well, your claws are going to be all elongated like weird nails. You ever seen that guy from the Guinness Book World Records with the long nails? That's exactly how it's going to look like. Really creepy. But having all that range is going to be so nice. And for the stance, you can use whatever you want. But I personally would recommend running Vermilion Storm because you can cosplay as a Whirlwind Barbarian from Diablo. And looking at the elements, Blast, Toxin, Mod, and with Melee Elementalist. Now with that we have 12 times Never mind, I wanted to show you the heavy attack and the increase in range, but we just wiped them out way too quickly. Alright, now that you see, I have activated the passive. They look like weird elongated nails. That's when you know you have the increase in range. And the damage is just way too broken right now. Look at this. That is stupid. That is clearly stupid. So those are the 4 melee builds. Your Sentinel and Companion does matter because the Sentinel will help you out with your passive. Your passive grants you status immunity. And when you have status immunity, you're just chilling. You're chilling. It helps you out so much with survivability, and you can foot max without running Prime Sure-Footed. I'm using the Diriga. We need our coil to assist us so it can help drop health orbs, and when we pick up those health orbs, that's when we activate Lavos's passive, hence why this is here. Tenacious Bond, very nice to have with Harmony, with the heavy attacks. That's additional critical damage, basically increasing our damage overall. And the Sentinel weapon is just the Volcox or the Volcock. This is just here to slot in critical delay so we can get over 50% crit chance so we can activate that Tenacious Bond. Woo! That's it. Lavos, ladies and gentlemen, completely destroys. I mean, he was already dominating with Valence Formation and melee influence. To be honest, that one augment completely changed how I feel about Lavos. Unfortunately, he's not a frame that I want to pick up every time, but definitely a frame that I want to use if it's with that augment, because right now he's one of the best weapon platformers out there. Anyway, folks, I do hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Seriously, a lot of people asking questions. Hey, what's that? Oh, what's this? The description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.